So you've gotten through your first live stream. We've taken a look at things. Well, hopefully we've troubleshooted together any kind of issues. And if not, this is what I'm here for. And this is what the community is here for. So let's figure out any little quirks or things that you might have had issues with. Almost always it's hardware related. It really doesn't have much to do with Ecamm. But just in case it is Ecamm, we can usually fix that pretty easily. And if it's not Ecamm, if it's hardware related, it gets a little bit more messy, I guess is probably not the right term, but it can get more complicated. So let's hope that, fingers crossed, that all the testing with the hardware that you did ahead of time paid off. And now you are sitting pretty with your first stream in the can, as it were, and you are now ready to move on. So that puts us actually all the way at lesson 11. Now, lesson 11 is, I call it a post-mortem, right? And that sounds so bad, but this has been a term that's been around forever. What happened after you were done? Go back and you look at all the things that went right, went wrong, and then how to fix them. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through and look at all the things that maybe you could have done differently to have a better live stream. You're never going to be perfect, especially at this level. If you're just getting started with Ecamm, you may be lucky enough to already have some camera presence, and that's great. But if you're just getting started and you don't really have any other experience other than you've been told, or you are exploring doing this live stream or presentations or pre-recordings or whatever that is, you will inevitably find chances for you to get better. And that's what we're here to analyze today. So lesson 11 is not going to be a whole lot of things regarding setting up Ecamm, using Ecamm. If there are issues with graphics, with your streaming, all that stuff, we want to get through and troubleshoot all that stuff so that it doesn't happen the next time, because the next time we're going to involve other people. All right, so let's take a dive in. This will be a relatively short one because everybody's situation is unique, but I'm going to give you some pointers on where to look if you encountered problems along the way. Okay, let's go. All right, let's go ahead and just look at any potential issues that you may have come across and why. You know, Ecamm is a piece of software and it has to integrate with a bunch of different pieces of software and hardware in order to get its job done. So in the case of live streaming, even if you have everything done properly when you're recording, like we did a couple lessons back, when you live stream, you're introducing some other elements into the mix that may cause potential problems. So we're going to take a look at a few of those. So first things first, we want to go through and see, did you have an echo? Now, if you had it on your recording, you're more than likely going to have it on your live stream. And an echo is often symptomatic of what happens when you have your speakers and your microphone very close to each other. So what it does is it creates a little bit of a loop, and what you'll hear is your voice coming out of the speakers, going back into the microphone, then going back into Ecamm, and then out to the internet, and then back to you again. And in extreme circumstances, that can lead to what is feedback, which is, you know, that intense shrill that you get from having your speakers on and too loud and your microphone listening. So what I often recommend is, in the case of doing a lot of your live presentations, there is a feature in Ecamm called echo cancellation, and I'll show you how to put that on. But if you're comfortable, you can wear headphones too. And these headphones, these are from Shure. I really like them. They're nice and comfy. These sound excellent, and they isolate the sound around you. So when you get your speaker feedback in. This is especially critical when we get to the next lesson, which is interviews. But if you're experiencing it now, it's going to be more of an issue with interviews. So getting a pair of headphones or what they call in-ear monitors, which are basically like, like AirPods, right? So this one, let me see if I can get it in focus. You can see that there. That is, it just kind of loops around like this. And you get the little wire. And there you go. So now, actually, because I have these hooked in, I can hear myself, and I know that I'm coming through, which is good. And this is one way to avoid the mic mute issue, by the way, is if you can hear yourself, then you know. But then again, a lot of people, like one of the reasons why you notice that I'm wearing black pretty much every lesson, that's because I have these black cords and they blend nicely. I also have the black microphones. So when I'm framing my scene up, I try and get it so that the black areas all kind of blend together and you're not distracted by them. I'm not a particular fan of having the microphone like this up into your face, or even worse, on the other side where it's out in clear space. So I tend to keep my stuff, if it's going to be in camera, then I will make it so that it's kind of blending. And that includes my in-ear monitors. And sometimes you only need one. So for instance, like you can see, this ear is kind of, I'm angled and looking at you this way. This ear is exposed, this one's not. So it's a little bit harder to see. Of course, you can see the cord here, but you can also drop the cords back behind you and people would be none the wiser unless you do this. So, and I'm a black and gold fan. It's something that I don't mind having, and it's kind of accepted in the industry. So in-ear monitors, and these are like $25. They're not expensive at all, and they get the job done. So I'll leave it to you to decide how you want to do that. But the other feature, let's go over to the Mac and we can look at echo cancellation. Okay, so here on the Macintosh, if I go to System and Preferences, and then go into my audio section, and you'll see here, use echo cancellation, and it prevents the sound from the Mac speakers from getting picked up by the microphone. This is something that you've actually got two settings here. Let's zoom in. You've got use echo cancellation, and this works on things like your Macintosh desktop. It's not perfect, but I don't know if you've ever wondered why a phone is designed the way it is, where the speaker is going into, or your ear, and then the mic is separated from that. And even in speaker mode, you notice when you sometimes what's called talk over the other person that you're talking to. And what's happening is the phone's own internal echo cancellation is waiting for your audio to stop before it allows more audio to come in from whoever you're talking to. Conversely, if they start talking and you talk, the microphone will cut off on your phone and it will allow that audio to come through. So you could be talking and then until they stop talking, you could be cut off. And they're getting better at it, but that's essentially what echo cancellation is. And it's more of what's called slapback. That's more of a standard industry term. Slapback is when you get that echo loop through your system. Feedback is not the correct terminology. So especially if you're online, you're on the Facebook forum, just say I've got a slapback issue where I'm hearing a single echo. If you're hearing multiple echoes and it's getting louder and louder and louder to the point where it's shrieking, that's feedback. But if you talk once and you hear it repeat once on a slight delay, that's slapback. So you just have to mitigate that by using a microphone and some kind of headphones, and then you've isolated the sound. So now the laptop would only pick up what's on my microphone, and it would also only go through my headphones. So there's nothing for the microphone to hear because it's going directly into my ear. Hope that makes sense. So use echo cancellation is a software feature. It's a way for Ecamm to kind of deal with this problem if you don't have a separate mic and headphone setup. So you can, and Ecamm will warn you, for instance, if you've got audio playing like music and you've got your microphone going. Here, let me show you. So I tell it to play some music. And of course I gotta unmute it. See what happens as soon as I unmute it? This little guy right here pops up. It says possible audio feedback detected, which means the music that I'm playing right now is coming through enough to where it's being picked up by the microphone on the Mac. So if I turn on echo cancellation, that deals with the issue, and you notice a little warning mark goes away. It's not foolproof, but it's much better than having echo or slapback. So hopefully that gives you some sense of what's going on here, but I'm going to turn this echo cancellation off because I have separate mics and headphones and whatnot. And then I'll go over to, you see here, there's another selection here. Enable echo cancellation for external speakers. It's pretty straightforward. It says it right underneath. It says pick that option when you're using speakers that are not part of your Mac, meaning they're further away and the way that it detects the potential for feedback is going to be slightly different. And so you would enable echo cancellation for the external speakers. If you've got like a pair of speakers on either side of your monitor or something like that, that's the way you would deal with it. One of the things I didn't really talk about in our preferences discussion was broadcast the system audio. And right now it's set to never. And the reason why I do that is I want control over what audio goes through my system. Matter of fact, that reminds me, I'm going to shut down that slider so I'm not getting any Macintosh feedback right now. So in this case, you could say when I'm sharing the screen, so if you want, let's say you're doing a demonstration and you want the audio to come through on that demonstration, you could say when I'm sharing the screen, and then you could say also all the time, which means that anytime you're doing a presentation, your Mac's audio, so all the warnings, the dings, and all that other stuff, that'll get recorded by Ecamm. Most of us don't want that. So we want control over that stuff. So I just leave it set to never. I mean, that's just the way I roll. If you're trying to demonstrate a specific feature where you want to capture the Mac's audio, you can do that through here. And then also this automatically mute the microphone and guest audio during video playback. I touched on this briefly, but what this does is if you have a movie that's part of your presentation and you want to play that movie, then you would put that into your scene. And then when you got to that scene and you started playing the movie, it would mute the microphones automatically. And you want that because you don't want to be talking either to yourself or you're sneezing or coughing or whatever. You don't want that picked up. I mean, one of the nice things about playing video during a presentation is you can kind of take a break while the video plays. It's kind of like radio disc jockeys, right? I know several of them here in the Seattle area, and when they are living and dying by like Stairway to Heaven because it's a long song, and that gives them enough time to go downstairs, have a smoke break, and, you know, kind of shoot the breeze, as it were, and then they get back up, and they've got plenty of time to do that. And it would be really awkward if you were hearing their conversations while the song was playing, right? So this, I would leave this set to on. If you start noticing that your scenes are, using a lot of video and you want to be able to talk over like a voiceover, I would uncheck this. That's a personal thing. Okay, so that's dealing with echo, and you're more than likely going to run into this with your interviews, regardless of what you set up here or how hard you got things working here. It's inherent in the way interviews work, not because of you. Your settings are going to be right, but it's going to be because of your guest. Okay, so we'll get to that when the getting's good. Let's go back over here, and let's take a look at. Okay, we checked our mic and speaker settings. Now, is it blocky or choppy? Now, this is something that I tend to attribute to a couple of things. First of all, is your internet speed and health, is it okay? That you can run the speed test on your Mac using the Ecamm preferences window to do that. And assuming that that is okay, then you want to start looking at your system resource usage. So in the case of my MacBook Pro, which is an older Mac, maybe my system resource usage is a little bit high. So remember, we went to Activity Monitor all the way back in lesson 1. That is where you would check to see if your Mac is being taxed for some reason. And it's always a good idea. I've mentioned this a couple of times. It's always a good idea to shut down other applications while you're going live or while you're recording so that Ecamm has full usage of your Mac's resources. Now, obviously, if you're doing something like what I'm doing right now, where I have a Keynote slideshow playing in conjunction with a live Ecamm window, obviously I need to have Keynote running, but if I had my preferences, I would not use Keynote in most cases, and that's why you haven't seen it until recently, because I think it's fun. I think it actually helps drive home points, especially if you're doing Zoom meetings. I mean, you can do this kind of stuff. Look, you've got a drop shadow, you got all these other things, but the sliding animation, all that stuff, those are things that take up system resources, valuable system resources. And if you start hooking up multiple cameras and you've got your microphone set up and your computer can't keep up, you'll know pretty quickly. So if it's blocky or choppy, you might want to check the local recording of your live stream, right? So if that's blocky or choppy, then it's going to be blocky and choppy up on YouTube as well. So the issue is very much local. If your local recording is playing back fine, then it was an internet issue. So how do you check your internet speed? Well, I'm going to go live real quick here and I'll show you. Okay, so let's go over to get out of this, and I'm going to go now and unlisted, and let's see, test for internet health. Okay, that's going to be set to unlisted. Not going to go schedule. I'm going to say go live now and go live now. And it'll tell me up at the top of the screen, I am now live on my YouTube channel. Okay, so one of the windows that you have here is bandwidth statistics. There we go. So if I click on that, what's happening right here is it's giving me a window that's showing me my rolling required bandwidth, my average throughput, the actual bandwidth, and that changes depending upon, for instance, if I go to an intro screen here, you see how it almost looks like a heartbeat? That's the way the internet works. It's kind of sending it in waves and waves and waves. And on the YouTube side, it's piecing that all together. So average required is actually less than 5.9 gigabits, which is what Ecamm told us. But at the same time, we have the space available to us in the event. So if I go to my main scene here and okay, let's get ourselves straight there again. Okay, so now look what happened is I went live, and now I'm going to start doing motion, and look at my average required. It's gone up a full gigabit just by me having, activity. So the way the compression works on your live stream is that the more motion there is, or the more data that has to be sent, because the interpolation data that's going through, interpolation basically means start point, end point, and what's in between is figured out by the computer. But sometimes in the case of, like, if I stay still, it's going to drop. You see, notice it's going down. And that's because I'm doing less movement, right? So, but if I go back to swinging my arms around and, doing all this, and there's a lot of movement on the screen like this, it's going to bump up my my internet bandwidth. And this gives me a very clear indicator of actually how much bandwidth I'm utilizing at any given time. So if you have the screen real estate for it, I would actually leave this up, at least initially. But if somebody's saying to you, hey, your feed is choppy, or it's pausing, or the audio's out of sync or something like that, I'd look here and see what my bandwidth is. And that's just a way, that's one more troubleshooting mechanism here. And look, if I go over to, let's launch it because it's not on activity monitor. So let's have both of these. Let's just look at both here at this particular point in time. And you can see my processor utilization is actually pretty low. And my memory utilization, I still haven't come close. This is memory used, 20 out of 32. So I have at least a third of my available memory going unused right now. So I got plenty of headspace, but the more I start utilizing, so let me go back to, let's see, I've got my main screen on. So it should, yeah, this is the max that I would see, which isn't bad. 20 gigabytes, not bad. But I remember when, you get a 16 megabytes in a machine and that cost a couple $1,000. So gigabytes, it's like gigabytes are so cheap nowadays. Okay, so that's how you do your bandwidth health. Is YouTube connecting? We may have gone through the last lesson and you were unable to get YouTube to talk to Ecamm. Or it'll say unable to start live stream, something like that. What does that mean? I mean, you did everything I did, so why is that not working? Well, there's a couple of things. We'll go over to the computer, I'll show you. All right, so if I go over to, let me turn off our bandwidth here, and we're in studioyoutube.com. And let's see, let's go ahead and hide Ecamm for the moment because it's in the way. And you can see here the live that we uploaded in the last lesson. And if I click on create and go live, it should give you the ability to look at what settings you've got here. So if you do right now, it'll set up a live stream and you'll have a chance. It says here, so you'll have a chance. So if you can't do it, you have to make sure that this screen even pops up. And if you do right now, that's a quick way. If your live didn't work, click on start for right now and see what happens. And it'll probably warn you that the hardware that you're using is not supported by Safari, which means you'd have to go to Chrome to do that. And that's fine. I mean, just download Chrome. It's a YouTube product. It's a Google product. Okay. So let us, so to get out of that window and just go back, that's the best way to do it. So you can see I'm still streaming right now and it says live now. And so I know mine is working. If your stream is unable to connect, it's probably a authentication issue, meaning Google doesn't have the right password or you have not enabled Ecamm to manage YouTube. So you want to make sure that all those settings are correct. And the best way to do that, if you have a problem with streaming to YouTube and you've set everything up, you've done the 24-hour wait period and you've set everything up, go into Ecamm and go into your preferences window, go to destinations, and then delete your YouTube account that you put here. It won't delete the account inside of YouTube, but it'll delete the connection to it inside of Ecamm, and then you can redo the connection, and that might just be enough to kick it in the head, especially if you had, you know, kind of minor glitches. It should work fine. So let me go ahead and get out of the stream, and I will go here and select finish, and then end broadcast. And then it says right here live, and as soon as that live icon changes from red to gray again and your screen comes back, you're good. You're back at it. All right, let's take a look at some other potential things that might show up. We just did another live test. It worked. Alter the stream settings if necessary. So for instance, if you're noticing that your things are blocky, make sure your settings inside Ecamm under the recording tab, everything's set to high quality, because that's where you're going, or your stream tab, that's where your settings are going to be utilized. If everything else looks good, just make sure that stuff is all checked. And generally speaking, in the time that I've been using Ecamm, I find that most people who are using it don't have problems going to YouTube. It's other platforms like Zoom and platforms that are slightly non-standard, and they bolted on their video conferencing capabilities thanks to the pandemic, that they're not fully fleshed out, or they can run into issues. So we'll talk about connecting to other platforms, including Zoom, including Teams, as another potential location for your streaming. So that, what you would want to do. And then also wait for the file to process. Meaning if you're inside of YouTube, it says processing here. But if it still says processing, let me go over here. And then I'll click on here. Notice that it still says live. YouTube doesn't have a way to really, it doesn't automatically refresh. It does some things automatically, but it does not. And you can see that it was streamed, and I can see video quality, SD, but the quickest way to know whether or not it's still processing is your video. If you just go to subtitles or something on the right hand side, it'll say your video is currently processing, check back later. So I know the one that we did in the last lesson is probably ready to go, because I can, because these are all highlighted now. So I can go to that file and then click play, and I've got my video going, and you can see. All right, this all looks good. Let me go into theater mode, which gets rid of some of the elements that I don't want to see on YouTube. Okay, so that's all looking good. You can, this is kind of cool. You can right click on your stream and then go stats for nerds, lower the very last one, and it'll pull up what your connection speed is, how much network activity, and then buffer health, all those things. This basically tells you, like here it says the viewport is 1347 by 12 and something. I think it might need to be bigger, and that it has dropped 2 frames, and you can see here's your details. Now, a lot of this stuff is not going to make any sense for you. That's okay. But if you see anything in here that's way out of whack.
Well, hello everyone. This is Jeremy Hubble, and I'm back.
Blah, blah, blah. Okay, be quiet, Jeremy. All right. So now I should be able to, this actually, if I go to stats for nerds, might show, yeah, it's increased quite a bit. The network activity will, you see how it's going in little chunks like this? And then what it's doing is it's downloading, buffering, downloading, buffering. And then that way, you ever notice that if you lose your internet connection, YouTube still runs for a little bit? That's the buffer. It's playing through the buffer. And then when it gets to the end of the buffer, that's when everything stops. Okay. So that's that's stats for nerds. And you can see here, if I zoom in, you know, the quality is good. Even though I recorded this at 1080, it actually came out okay. And this looks pretty good on my laptop, which is, you know, some over 2000 by over 1000 display, and that looks pretty good. Now 4K will look even more what people call crispy. I don't know, it's whatever. Crispy just means it's not smooth. It's a crisp image means that you can pick out the sharpness of the image. That's all it is. So if I were to stream this at 4K, then yeah, it would look a little bit better. But I'm trying not to kill the internet right now. I mean, and you're really not. But it will take up, if you were to think about a 4K stream being 1920 by 1080 sections being streamed at the same time, you're essentially quadrupling the amount of bandwidth needed, right? Because a full frame 4K display or full frame 4K presentation of video file is, that's why they, 4K. It's 4 times HD. It's called Ultra HD, UHD. So that's what I would definitely be careful about. Test it at 1080, make sure it's working, then go up to 4K, or even there's an intermediate step that's 1440. And that's 1440 high instead of 2160. So it's about halfway there. And just find out what works best for you. Keep in mind that your streaming settings, a lot of discussions been based around what frame rate do I capture at? And without going into too much detail, because it's outside the scope of this lesson, I would just leave everything set to 30 frames a second. That's the video standard. Actually, technically it's 29.97, but who's counting? If you leave it at 30 frames per second, then your stream will go out at 30 frames per second and it'll look just fine. The motion blur will look good because you're streaming at a frame rate that the eye can deal with. Do you remember when, for instance, when the NFL, the American Football League, decided to incorporate, or a lot of the sports broadcasts decided to incorporate 60p into their broadcast, and everything just looked really unnatural. You could see every single frame, and it was, that's fine, but at the same time, it also was a little bit disconcerting to your eye. That's just normal. That's totally normal. That's why they went back to 30. And now they're just playing around with depth of field, that kind of stuff. And for some reason they want like super depth of field. That's what you see in like the end zone and stuff like that. But I mean, whatever. That doesn't mean anything for us. Like I said, this one's going to be a short one. We're only going to be about total 40 minutes, 45 minutes for this lesson. If you're still having problems, reach out to the community, and chances are somebody has encountered your specific issue. If you're not seeing your camera feed, you need to go back a few lessons and figure out why your camera's not talking to your Mac. If your camera is talking to your Mac properly, it should show up in QuickTime. Same thing goes for your microphone. If that stuff is all working in QuickTime, then it should work in Ecamm just fine. The big question mark is back to that audio, the very first thing that we talked about in this lesson. And you want to make sure that when you're doing your audio setup that you are using, you know, the proper equipment so that you're not having your sound kind of go through this, pardon the term, infinite loop that will cause that slapback effect. So you don't want to do that. But that is it. The next lesson, I'm assuming at this point, I would also make the point to say, don't go any further. If you haven't gotten everything working, don't go any further, because once you introduce other third-party applications, because right now, for instance, we've been all inside Ecamm. We use YouTube's interface a little bit to customize things, but when it comes to doing Zoom and Teams and interviews and all that other stuff, you better make sure your hardware, that your sandbox is working good, so that you know that any other problems that creep up, chances are it's something that's occurring with the connection to the software or to your guest on the interviews. So the next section will be lesson 12, and that'll be your interviews. And then lesson 13 will be streaming to other platforms. And then we'll wrap it in 14. Can't believe we're getting that close. Wow. All right. So until then, happy streaming. Play. You know, do a bunch of live streams. Doesn't matter. It's all unpublished anyway. So, you know, keep playing. This is a great time. It's a great opportunity to get some on-camera confidence. If you're not quite used to staring into a lens like I'm doing right now, for instance, you might want to play around with that a little bit and just get a little bit better at doing that. Also, remember my discussion on teleprompters and scripts versus bullet points, and get yourself a little sticky notepad if you don't have one already. They're super cheap. You can get a box of like 1 million or something. Nah, I'm kidding, but you can get a lot from, you know, Amazon and other websites, and just write your bullet points and just stick them all around your camera, and that'll ensure that you've discussed everything. And use transitions to your advantage. For instance, like when I go over to here and I'm on this screen, I'm actually on a different camera and I'm on a different microphone. So I've got 2 mics here. This one's closer to my mouth when I'm using the laptop, and I don't want to have to swing stuff over. The main reason is that if I swing this microphone over that's over on the other side, you see what happens in that lower display on the left side? Yeah, that microphone arm gets right in the way. So I want to leave it outside of the frame so you can still see my hands using the keyboard. And so make sure your audio is working correctly. If you have no other audio source or microphone source other than your iPhone, use the iPhone instead of your laptop. And even then, I still wouldn't recommend it. Shure makes a product called the MV88 that is a tiny little shotgun mic that plugs into the lightning port of your phone. I would seriously consider that, or using a USB connection to that mic and then putting that mic on top of your laptop instead of using the built-in mic. And that's, I think that whole kit was kind of cool. It comes with like a mini tripod and everything too. That way you can set up your phone wherever you want. I would say that would be a great starting option. And I don't believe it's terribly expensive, but it does come with the iPhone mount, the tripod, and then of course the microphone. So everything you need to have an external microphone source. Ultimately, you want to use a good mic, just because, like I said, and I've said this so many times, and you'll hear this multiple times through other instructors, through people who are experts at using Ecamm, people who are experts in broadcast media, that the audio, if the audio is poor, it doesn't matter how good your video is, people will tune out. So, all right, we'll leave it at that, and I will see you in the next lesson when we do our first interview. Oh, and make sure to get a buddy, because we're going to have that buddy log into Ecamm via their mobile phone or their laptop but make sure they have Chrome installed. I think just overall that'll give you a better experience. So whether it's Chrome on iOS or Chrome on the Mac or even Windows, if you need to, you can do this. So the interview guests do not need to be on a Mac. They just need to have Chrome. That's it. All right. We'll see you in the next lesson. Getting close, folks. See you soon. Bye.